Brad Pitt enters a luxurious restaurant in the city center, dressed in simple, crumpled clothes, as if he had just come from an ordinary working day. He chooses an inconspicuous table, trying to remain unnoticed while the glow of crystal chandeliers illuminates the space around him. But before he has time to make an order, a waitress comes up to him with an expression of contempt and a high-profile grumble. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" She speaks with a sharp tone, loud enough for other guests to hear. What happens next not only amazes everyone in the restaurant, but also reveals the truth that changes everything. Before continuing this story, write where you are watching us from. If you like such stories, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at 12:30 we have prepared another special story for you. The Lumiere restaurant was a symbol of sophistication in Beverly Hills, located on one of the most prestigious streets of the city. Its wide windows opened up the view of the street, illuminated by luxurious neon signs and slowly moving sports cars. Inside, each detail was carefully selected to make an impression. Lumiere was not just a restaurant, it was a place for those who wanted to be seen and admired by them. Ashley, one of the most experienced Lumiere waitresses, confidently moved around the hall, not forgetting about the learned smile. Her impeccable bun and the shape sewn on the order emphasized her image of an effective and controlling personality. Working here was not just a job, it was a privilege. At least that's what Ashley thought. Working as a waitress in one of the most famous restaurants in Beverly Hills, she was proud of it and often mentioned her position. But Ashley had another side, an exaggerated sense of pride, which often turned into arrogance. She had an unusual talent for quickly judging guests, categorizing them by clothes, behavior, and appearance. Some people just shouldn't be here, she often thought. The door of the restaurant with a glass partition smoothly opened, and a man entered the hall. He was dressed in worn jeans, a simple shirt and jacket, which seemed comfortable but had no signs of a luxurious brand. His presence was restrained, almost invisible, when he calmly went to the registration desk. Brad Pitt Reeves was not a person who liked to show off his wealth. Despite the fact that he was one of the most famous Hollywood stars, his restrained behavior sharply contrasted with the bright shine of Beverly Hills, and at that moment he seemed just another ordinary visitor. Ashley was busy at the registration desk discussing VIP booking with another employee when she noticed Brad Pitt. She abruptly stopped talking, looking him in the eye and judging him with a barely hidden contempt. He did not look like a typical Lumiere customer at all. Not hiding her discontent, she bowed her head and slowly examined him. Her gaze lingered on his scratched shoes. "Good evening," she said in a dry tone, forcing a smile that vanished almost instantly. "How can I help you?" "I would like a table, please," Brad Pitt replied. His voice was polite and calm. Ashley raised her eyebrows as if she had just heard something ridiculous. Her facial expression seemed to ask, "How dare he?" She crossed her arms and the smile disappeared completely. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a very exclusive restaurant." Brad Pitt continued to smile without paying attention to her reaction. "Yes, this is the place," he calmly replied. Ashley briefly laughed, shaking her head. "Okay, wait a minute, I need to check something." She quickly turned around and went to the office for registration, not bothering herself with the maintenance of at least some polite behavior. There she went into the booking system and, typing his name with an exaggerated gesture, found that nothing was found. Rolling her eyes, she returned to the hall, clearly irritated. "Well, as I suspected, you have no armor," she said. Her voice was full of sarcasm. "We have a few free tables, but just so you know, this is not a random place for dinner." Brad Pitt remained calm. His cold blood seemed to irritate her even more. "I would like to have dinner here," he answered. His voice did not change. Ashley took a deep breath, sharply grabbing the menu. "Okay, but I have to put you in the right zone. Follow me." She quickly went through the hall, not turning around to check if he was following her. When they approached the farthest, least attractive corner of the restaurant, she threw the menu on the table with a clear noise. "Here you are." "This table is perfect for you," she said in a falsely sweet tone. "If you need anything, let me know. But only if it is necessary, okay?" Brad Pitt kept his light smile without paying attention to her intonation. "Thank you. I'm sure it will be an interesting experience." When she left, Ashley muttered to herself, loud enough for the next pair to hear, "He won't stay here for 5 minutes. I bet he'll leave as soon as he opens the menu." Throughout the hall, Brad Pitt calmly opened the menu. His eyes slipped through the options, slowly. Live music continued to fill the air, but something in his posture was intriguing, as if nothing could disturb his calm. On the other side of the hall, Ashley watched with a self-satisfied smile, being sure that he would soon ask for the bill and disappear. Ashley walked Brad Pitt through the hall with quick, mechanical steps, without even having time to look at him. Instead of choosing a table in the center where the golden light of the chandeliers emphasizes the elegance of the surrounding environment, she took him to the most hidden and poorly lit corner of the restaurant. It was a table by the kitchen where the sound of washing dishes and muffled conversations of the staff created an atmosphere far from the rest of the hall. "Here, this table will do," she said, carelessly placing the menu on the table. "I think you will be comfortable here. It is more secluded here." Brad Pitt looked at the table and then at Ashley. His weak smile remained unchanged. "Thank you," he calmly answered. She crossed her arms and shrugged, as if trying to figure out whether it was sarcasm or just a misunderstanding on his part. "Please," she answered. Her voice was full of sarcasm. "Just so you know, we usually leave these tables for special occasions, but since we don't have reservation today, you can sit here." Turning around on her heels, she left before he had time to answer. When Ashley returned to the table to take the order, her behavior became even more cruel. She pulled out a notebook with an exaggerated movement and looked at Kiana coldly. "You have already decided what you want?" she asked, without trying to hide the boredom in her voice. "Or do you need an offer?" Kiana looked at the menu and calmly pointed to one of the most expensive main dishes. "I would like to try it." Ashley suppressed her laughter, covering her mouth with her hand, as if trying to contain a bitter remark. "Oh, of course. Fili de Rossini," she said in a high-pitched tone. "A classic dish." "Just to clarify, sir, do you know that it costs $350? Brad Pitt nodded. His calmness did not change. "Yes, it sounds great." She bowed her head, her lips bent in an angry smile. "Okay, just so there are no misunderstandings later, I suggest you double-check the prices. I don't want anyone to run into unpleasant surprises." Brad Pitt remained indignant, which seemed to irritate her even more. "I'm sure," he said calmly. Ashley took a dramatic breath, as if she owed him a huge debt, and wrote down the order. "Very good, as you wish. But I warn you, our chef prefers such dishes to be enjoyed by those who really appreciate high cuisine. I hope it lives up to your expectations." She turned around on her heels again, but before she left, she stopped and turned around. "Oh, and one more thing. The minimum amount of tea here is 20 pence. Keep this in mind while enjoying." While he was waiting, Brad Pitt seemed completely indignant at the discomfort that Ashley was trying to create. He looked around, admiring the scenery and the pianist's play. When the appetizer came, Ashley put the plate with force and made it slide slightly on the table. "Here's your appetizer. I hope you like it, or at least you know what you're eating," she said with a ridiculous smile. Brad Pitt politely thanked her. "Thank you." Ashley leaned slightly as if trying to cause a reaction. "You know, many customers who order this dish in the end do not like it. It is not quite mainstream, but I think you will like it. Good luck." Brad Pitt looked at her with the same calm expression as always. "It looks great. Thank you for your attention." Upset by the fact that she could not cause him a negative reaction, Ashley quickly left, muttering something to her colleague. "This guy won't even make it to the main course. He will ask for the bill as soon as he sees the bill." Meanwhile, Brad Pitt continued to eat his snack. On the other side of the hall, Ashley watched from a distance, crossing her hands. An angry smile appeared on her face when she noticed that he seemed to be distracted. "I bet he will ask for drinking water. This always happens." she commented to another employee who clearly ignored her, feeling discomfort. However, the elderly client continued to watch the next table. He raised a glass of wine and silently brought it to Brad Pitt, who replied with a light nod and a smile. The dinner was just beginning, but Ashley's growing contempt will soon be unnoticed. After Brad Pitt made his order, Ashley decided to teach a lesson to the client, who, in her opinion, did not have the right to be here. Instead of immediately handing over the order to the kitchen, she decided to prioritize serving those guests whom she considered more important. She stopped to chat with an elegant couple in the center of the hall, laughed loudly at the joke told by another guest, and even brought a cocktail to the table which was not hers. Meanwhile, the time passed and the ocean continued to patiently wait. In an attempt to cause his reaction, Ashley repeatedly passed by his table, pretending to be busy. Every time he looked in her direction, she turned away and accelerated her step, as if she were too busy to pay attention to him. After a long wait, Brad Pitt came up to one of the customers who were watching the situation. An elderly man with neatly combed white hair and in a dark blue suit came up with a kind smile. "Good evening, young man. I hope you don't mind that I'm interfering, but I noticed that you are being ignored," he said. His tone was polite but firm. Brad Pitt smiled calmly. "Good evening. Don't worry, everything is fine." The elderly man quietly laughed and bent over to speak quietly. "You know, sometimes this attitude is a test of our patience, but I can say with confidence that maintaining calm is a sign of strength." Before Brad Pitt had time to answer, Ashley suddenly appeared, interrupting the conversation. "Sir, can I help you with something?" she asked the elderly man. Her voice was more sharp than usual, but with a barely noticeable authoritative tone. "I would not like you to interfere with our client." The elderly man shrugged but remained calm. "Do not worry, miss. I just greet this gentleman. You rarely meet someone so calm." Ashley let out an exaggerated sigh and pointed to the man's table. "But maybe you should go back to your table and enjoy your dinner," she said impatiently. Brad Pitt just watched the interaction. His expression was calm but analytical. "Thank you for coming," he said to the elderly man with a slight nod. "It was nice to talk to you." The man nodded and returned to his table, but not before throwing the last look of disapproval at Ashley, who seemed completely indifferent. When Ashley finally brought the main dish to Brad Pitt, she tried to spend more time than necessary. At first, she stopped in the kitchen to chat with the cooks, leaving the dish under the heating lamp. Then she returned to the hall to serve another table, completely ignoring the ready-made plate. When she finally brought the dish, she put it on the table to Brad Pitt with a sharp gesture. "Here is your order, I hope you like it," she said with an ironic tone. "And if you don't like it, please let us know. We can always offer something more affordable." Brad Pitt thanked her with the same calm tone as before. "It looks great, thank you." Ashley made a cynical smile and slightly bent, lowering her voice so that it could be heard only by him. "Are you sure? This is a very difficult dish. Maybe it will be difficult for those who are not used to this." "I'm sure," I calmly replied to Brad Pitt. "Thank you for your concern." Annoyed by the fact that she could not cause him any negative reaction, Ashley quickly left. After the bar, Ashley commented on her colleague, who unsuccessfully tried to ignore her comments. "He pretends to be polite, but it is obvious that he is uncomfortable," she said with a laugh, putting an empty glass on the bar counter. "I bet he doesn't even know what he's eating. It's always like this. They come here to feel important, and then they pretend to be fools." Her colleague stretched out and smiled, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "Maybe he just wants to have dinner, Ashley. Maybe we should treat him like any other client." She looked at him with bewilderment, like any other client. "Did you see his shoes? He shouldn't be here. And to be honest, if he can't stand it, he shouldn't have come to this restaurant at all." Meanwhile, the couple who was watching the situation earlier whispered to each other. "She's terrible," said the woman, shaking her head. "He's so polite, but she's always trying to humiliate him." "I agree," the man frowned. "It's a shame. I think we should tell the manager something." At this time, Brad Pitt calmly finished the main course. He looked around, noticing the compassionate looks of other customers, but he didn't look irritated. When Ashley returned to pick up the plate, there was still a contemptuous smile on her face. "Well, how was the dish? Did it live up to your expectations?" she asked with a fake smile. Brad Pitt looked her right in the eye and replied, "It was great, thank you. Please tell the cooks that they did a flawless job." She raised her eyebrows, surprised that she could not cause complaints or irritation. When she left with him, she muttered something to herself, but loud enough to be heard. He may be smiling now, but we'll see what happens when the time comes. Sitting at the table, Brad Pitt watched calmly with a slight smile on his face. His gaze said that the moment to act was getting closer. Ashley, more and more irritated by her inability to cause a reaction to Brad Pitt, decided to increase her provocations. After she served him the requested coffee, she specifically said loudly so that several near-lying tables could hear, "You know, it's hard to keep standards when anyone can come in," she said to her colleague, looking at Brad Pitt. The colleague, clearly feeling discomfort, tried to change the subject, but Ashley continued. "This is why we have an armor policy. It helps us avoid such situations." A few tables nearby began to listen carefully, some got gloomy, others whispered to each other. The couple who was watching what was happening was furious. The woman put her hand on her chest, whispering, "This is outrageous. She is trying to humiliate him publicly." The elderly man at the table next door took a sip of wine, watching the scene with a look of condemnation. He rummaged under his nose. "This is too much." Brad Pitt, still calmly sitting at the table, looked around the hall, not showing the slightest irritation. His calm behavior seemed to bother Ashley even more, because now she felt the looks of other clients. The woman sitting at 2 tables in front noticed her companion. He must be someone important since he maintains such calm. Any other would have left. Or maybe he's just stronger than she thinks? The man replied, looking curiously at Brad Pitt. Deciding to provoke the reaction, Ashley returned to Brad Pitt's table to ask if he needed anything else, but her approach was far from professional. "I hope you enjoy your experience," she said with an exaggerated sarcastic smile. "After all, it is always interesting to see people of different types here. This adds a unique atmosphere." Brad Pitt, looking at her with a steady look, finally answered. His voice was calm, but it sounded heavy. "Different? Can you explain what you mean?" Ashley briefly laughed nervously, trying to stay calm. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that we usually have a more traditional clientele. Rarely anyone with your style comes here." Silence reigned in the hall. The guests who were nearby stopped talking, clearly paying attention to what was happening. Ashley looked happy that she was noticed, believing that she was controlling the situation. Brad Pitt kept silent for a few moments, holding her gaze. His expression was decisive but devoid of anger. Finally, he said, "You are right. Maybe I should act differently." Ashley blinked, but before she could answer, the restaurant manager appeared. The manager, a middle-aged man with impeccable posture and expression of power, examined the hall and immediately felt the tense atmosphere. When his gaze fell on Brad Pitt, his expression changed. He quickly approached the table, completely ignoring Ashley. "Mr. Reeves?" the manager exclaimed. His tone was full of respect. "I did not know that you would visit us today. Please tell me how I can help you." Ashley's face turned pale. The blood left it while she watched what was happening. She looked at the manager, then at Brad Pitt, unable to understand what was going on. Brad Pitt for a moment met with a look at the manager and then turned his attention to Ashley again. "Now," he said, his voice was calm but powerful. "Let's talk about how we feel about people." The silence in the hall was deafening. All eyes were fixed on the table of Brad Pitt, waiting for what would happen next. The manager of the Remier restaurant, a man with impeccable appearance and command behavior, was clearly excited, assessing the situation. Completely ignoring Ashley, he turned directly to Brad Pitt, slightly leaning in a gesture of respect. "Mr. Reeves, I apologize for the delay in recognizing you. It is an honor that you are with us tonight. Please tell me how I can make your stay more pleasant." He said his tone was full of respect. Ashley, who had thought so far that she was controlling the situation, froze. Her mind was torn apart, trying to figure out what was going on. "Mr. Reeves? Does he know him? What's going on here?" Brad Pitt looked at the manager, slightly smiling. "Thank you, but don't worry. I'm fine. I just wanted to have a short conversation with your staff, if that's not a problem." The expression of the manager's face immediately became worried. He realized that something was wrong. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, whatever you want." He threw a sharp, condemning look at Ashley, who stood next to them, pale and clearly uncomfortable. Ashley began to stutter, desperately trying to regain some kind of control over the situation. I didn't know. I thought..." The manager interrupted her with determination. "I thought about what, Ashley? That this client, who, as it turns out, is one of the owners of this restaurant, does not deserve the same respect as everyone else." His voice was quiet, but it sounded strict, which completely deprived Ashley of her dignity. Ashley tried to justify herself. He didn't say who he was, and he looked. She was silent, realizing that everything she said would only aggravate her situation. Brad Pitt finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, but it sounded like his words were echoed in every corner of the hall. "You don't have to say who I am to be treated with dignity. To be honest, it shouldn't matter. Anyone who crosses this threshold, regardless of how he is dressed, should be met with respect." The whole restaurant froze. Many visitors whispered to each other, shocked by the fact that Brad Pitt turned out to be one of the owners of the restaurant. The couple, observing the situation, looked satisfied, and the elderly man barely noticeably nodded in approval. Conversations began to arise at the neighboring tables. The man sitting with his wife whispered, "I knew something was wrong with him. He has a special presence that is impossible not to notice." The woman nodded. "And look how he solves it. What a nobility." "I hope she learned a lesson," another guest whispered. Others whispered to each other. Some were clearly ashamed that they had not intervened before. The atmosphere in the restaurant remained tense, but the feeling of anticipation was in the air. Everyone was waiting to see how it would end. The manager turned to Ashley again. His facial expression was a mixture of disappointment and restraint. "Ashley, I expect a detailed explanation of your behavior after your shift. In the meantime, please leave this table and stay away from it. I'll take care of it." Ashley opened her mouth to object, but the manager's decisive look forced her to be silent. With a sharp movement, she turned around and hurriedly walked away, avoiding the guests' gazes. Brad Pitt took a deep breath and got up. He looked at the hall, noticing that all eyes were directed at him. He began to speak in a calm but powerful tone. This restaurant was based on the idea of becoming a place where everyone can feel welcome, regardless of how they are dressed or where they came from. Unfortunately, this is not the case today, but I believe that we can take lessons from this situation. The guests were silent, accepting his words. The manager looked both worried and delighted with how Brad Pitt was solving the situation. Brad Pitt turned to the manager and finished. "I would like to meet with the team after the restaurant is closed. There are important things that we need to discuss." The manager immediately nodded. "It will be done, Mr. Reeves. Once again, I apologize for everything." Brad Pitt returned to his table and the restaurant began to return to its usual rhythm, although the guests continued to whisper that they had just become witnesses. The empty Lumiere restaurant was quiet. The staff gathered together and Brad Pitt remained in the center. His presence covered the space. He looked at everyone, meeting with every look, conveying deep calm but also unwavering determination. "We all make mistakes." He started, his voice was firm and sound. "But in fact, it is important what we do after these mistakes. Today we have witnessed problems that go far beyond the framework of bad service. We have seen the consequences of hasty judgments, hidden prejudices, and lack of empathy. But I want you to understand, this is not a judgment. This is an opportunity." Brad Pitt paused, allowing his words to settle. His gaze was on Ashley, who was sitting in the corner. Her eyes were full of tears and shame. "Ashley," he said. His tone was soft but firm. I know that what happened today was a mistake, and mistakes can be corrected if there is an effort and a desire to learn. What you do next will determine who you are." Brad Pitt turned to the rest of the team. His voice became softer, but he did not lose his goal. In the world in which we live, it is too easy to judge people by what we see on the surface, by their clothes, appearance, what they ride on, or where they live. But I want you to think about something. What happens when you decide to treat someone with kindness, when you decide to look beyond your appearance and recognize the human dignity of another? He stepped forward, putting his hands in his pockets, and his tone became more thoughtful. We all have problems that no one sees. A person who seems inappropriate can experience the worst day of his life. The one who is not dressed as it is customary can achieve more than you can imagine. The good that we decide to show, especially in relation to those who seem unworthy, can be exactly the gesture that will change everything. The staff was silent, listening to his words. Some were clearly touched, others looked down, thinking deeply about their own actions. Ashley finally raised her head, wiping her tears. Her voice was quiet, but full of repentance. I never thought about it like that before," she admitted. "I was so focused on the image of the restaurant, on upholding the standards, that I forgot what was really important. I forgot that every person has value regardless of who he is and how he looks. I promise, Mr. Reeves, I will change." Brad Pitt nodded, giving her a small, encouraging smile. "This is a promise you give to yourself, Ashley, not to me. True changes happen from the inside, and if you need help, I will be there." She nodded energetically. A mixture of relief and determination appeared on her face. Kindness is not in big gestures. This is in small decisions that we make every day. This is to treat everyone we meet as if they mattered, because they do. And this is that determines the character of the place and the person. Oh, Mr. Reeves, your message was clear. We will try to make sure that Lumiere will reflect what you have in mind. Thank you for reminding us of this." Brad Pitt just nodded, giving a soft smile when he left the restaurant. The streets of Beverly Hills flickered under the city lights. He stopped for a while on the sidewalk, looking at the entrance to Lumiere. His soft smile returned when he thought about what had happened. This evening was not just about the restaurant or the offended client. It was about the importance of creating a place where people can feel noticed, heard, and appreciated. Keane knew that even in the most difficult situations, there is an opportunity to inspire and transform. And walking along the illuminated streets of Mosaic, he thought not only about what he said, but also about the message that he hoped others would extract from this night. If he could leave everyone who heard this story one thought, it would be this: in a world where you can be anyone, choose to be kind. True strength is not in judgment, but in acceptance. And first of all, remember that it is in the small choices that we make every day that we form not only the world around us, but also who we are as people.